Content warning. This audiobook contains strong language, sexual themes, supernatural elements, and graphic depictions of death. The author recommends this work for audiences aged 18 and over. If you let your 6-year-old listen, that's on you. Dark Matter, The Order of the Hidden Cross, by Ian Bailey, published by Ashlar Press. Copyright 2025. Chapter 16. Dark Forces. The black SUV roared through the cobbled streets of Rome, the Vatican's spires piercing the night sky like silent sentinels. Father Filadelfo sat stiffly in the back seat, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. Filadelfo felt the edges of his mind unraveling. He gripped the seatbelt as though it were a rosary, his lips moving silently in prayer, though the words faltered on his tongue. What had I seen? The question gnawed at him, but no answer came. The Monsignor's face, twisted in pain, or perhaps ecstasy, flashed before him, followed by the blazing light that seemed to sear into his very soul. Was it truly divine, or something darker, cloaked in glory? A fresh wave of nausea gripped him, his faith teetering under the weight of confusion. The silence in the car was suffocating, and even the driver's calm presence felt like a veil, hiding truths Filadelfo was not ready to confront. Every instinct told him that nothing good awaited him at the end of this journey. The Vatican's gates loomed ahead, wrought iron and imposing, their intricate designs seeming to shimmer in the moonlight. As the SUV slowed, the guards on duty waved them through without so much as a glance. The driver's silence was unnerving, and Filadelfo felt the weight of unseen eyes as the vehicle rolled deeper into the Vatican grounds. Finally, the car came to a halt in a secluded courtyard. The engine cut off, and the driver stepped out. Moving swiftly to Filadelfo's side, he opened the door and motioned for him to step out. "This way, Father," the driver said curtly, his voice betraying neither warmth nor malice. Filadelfo hesitated for only a moment before stepping into the chill of the night. His shoes crunched softly against the gravel as he followed the driver up a set of wide stone steps. At the top stood 2 Vatican guards, their faces set like stone, their eyes giving nothing away. The driver exchanged a brief nod with the guards before turning back to Filadelfo. "They'll take you from here." Without another word, he descended the steps, disappearing into the shadows. One of the guards stepped forward. "Father Filadelfo," he said, his voice low and formal. "Follow us." The massive doors behind them groaned open, revealing a long corridor lit by flickering torches. The air inside was heavy with incense, and the walls were lined with ancient tapestries depicting battles between angels and demons. Filadelfo's footsteps echoed faintly as he walked between the 2 guards, his unease growing with every step. He wanted to ask where they were taking him, but something about their silence warned him against speaking. After what felt like an eternity, they arrived at another set of doors, smaller but no less ornate. One of the guards knocked twice, the sound reverberating in the stillness. A moment later, the doors opened and Filadelfo was ushered inside. The chamber was dimly lit, the soft glow of candles casting dancing shadows across the high, vaulted ceiling. At the far end of the room stood a desk, its surface cluttered with manuscripts and relics. Behind it sat a figure shrouded in shadow, the faint outline of his silhouette barely visible in the candlelight. "Father Filadelfo," the figure spoke, his voice calm yet carrying an undeniable authority. "You have seen much." Filadelfo's breath caught in his throat. "Your Holiness?" he ventured, though he could not see the man's face clearly. The figure leaned forward slightly, but the shadows seemed to deepen, obscuring his features further. "You are not here to ask questions, my son. You are here to listen. What you witnessed was no accident. There are forces at work, forces older than the Church itself, forces that have long sought to unseat the divine order." The words hung heavy in the air, and Filadelfo felt a cold sweat break out on his brow. I don't understand, he stammered. You do not need to, the voice replied, a hint of finality in its tone. Your role in this has only just begun. You will be guided from here, but know this: silence is your salvation. Speak of what you have seen to no one, not even in prayer. Before Filadelfo could respond, the figure gestured to one of the guards. Take him to the dormitory. He will remain under observation. The guard stepped forward, his hand lightly resting on Filadelfo's shoulder. Come, father. As the guard led Filadelfo out of the chamber, the shadowed figure turned back to his desk. His hand rested on a small medallion engraved with an unfamiliar symbol, two crossed keys intertwined with a serpent. The flickering candlelight played tricks on the design, making it seem as though the serpent writhed beneath his fingers. At the same moment, hundreds of miles away in the Monsignor's office, Archbishop Bussi stared at a faded parchment bearing the same symbol. He traced the lines absently, his thoughts a storm of questions. The weight of what he had discovered over decades pressed against his chest like a vice. Somewhere deep inside, he knew the truth was already spiraling out of his control. Bussi had been collecting information on the Order of the Hidden Cross for decades, though he would never dare admit it aloud. Even within the confines of the Vatican's most secretive chambers, there were eyes, ears. He had learned this the hard way, as a young priest just beginning to understand the darker undercurrents within the church's walls. The order he had discovered through whispers and half-burned letters had been guarding something, no, someone, for centuries. A man who, if freed, could unravel the very fabric of the church's foundations. For years, Bussi had been careful and methodical in his search for answers. He had built a lifetime's worth of trust, rising quietly through the ranks, always staying in the church's good graces while secretly gathering scraps of knowledge that few dared even acknowledge. But it had all started with a dream that had haunted him since his early days in the priesthood. He had seen a boy, no older than 10, holding a key in his hand, standing before a massive door etched with ancient symbols. Behind the door lay the truth, a truth so dangerous that its mere existence threatened to bring everything crashing down. Bussi had spent his life searching for that boy, never realizing until recently that the child existed, not in this world, but in another, a parallel universe. It was Barris, an unearthly creature sent by Joshua Carpenter, who had revealed this to him. Barris had appeared to Bussi during his meditations, a messenger from a dimension far beyond his understanding. Joshua, a boy whose own fate was intertwined with the very fabric of the universe, had tasked Bussi with a mission: find the man imprisoned beneath the Vatican and set him free. But the task was dangerous. Even knowing the truth about the Order of the Hidden Cross could bring death. That's why Bussi had been cautious. He couldn't act rashly. He couldn't ask questions openly. But he had kept his eyes and ears open, and now, after years of quiet investigation, he was closer to the truth than ever before. Earlier that night, Barris had appeared to Bussi again, as he often did during times of meditation. The small being's presence had become a comfort to the Archbishop, despite the otherworldly nature of their connection. Joshua has one last message, Barris had said, his voice soft but clear. You must ensure that Filadelfo is placed in the Order of the Hidden Cross. Bussi had blinked, confused. The Order. But no outsider has ever been allowed in. They are raised from birth, isolated, indoctrinated. Joshua speaks the truth, Barris had insisted, his eyes glimmering with an almost impossible depth. Filadelfo is essential to the plan. The man they guard, Yehoshua, cannot be freed without him. Bussi had always been a man of action despite his many years in the church. His instincts told him something was wrong the moment Father Filadelfo left under the Vatican Guard's escort. Bussi had done his best to convince the Pope that Filadelfo needed guidance, protection even, but as soon as the guards had whisked him away, something deep inside gnawed at him. There was a darkness swirling around this entire affair. Decades of whispered rumors, unspoken truths, and cryptic encounters with the mysterious Order of the Hidden Cross had led him to this point. And now Filadelfo, an innocent, confused priest, was being dragged into the heart of that storm. Bussi wasted no time. Without thinking, he threw on his coat, hurried down the steps of his private office, and raced to the garage. His hands shook as he started the engine of his car, the cold night air already misting his breath. He knew where they were taking Filadelfo, to the Vatican, to the heart of everything. The streets were empty, eerily quiet, as he tore through the winding roads. His mind buzzed with 1,000 thoughts, but all of them came back to the same terrifying conclusion. He couldn't let this happen. Filadelfo had seen too much, and Bussi knew all too well what happened to those who saw too much. He couldn't let the Vatican swallow him whole. After driving for what felt like an eternity, Bussi spotted the guard's SUV up ahead. His heart pounded. He was getting close. But just as he neared the vehicle, something strange caught his attention. Up ahead, 2 black SUVs were parked across the road, engines still running, their headlights casting long shadows in the night. A man in a tailored suit stepped out of one of the vehicles, flanked by several others who remained in the shadows. Bussi's stomach twisted with unease. He brought his car to a slow stop, his headlights casting just enough light to see the men clearly. One of them turned, his face a mask of cold detachment, and met Bussi's gaze. It was as if they were waiting for him, just as they had been waiting for Filadelfo. The moment stretched out, the cold air thick with tension. Bussi didn't move, neither did the men. Then, with a faint nod from the suited man, they seemed to acknowledge each other. No words were exchanged. It wasn't necessary. Whatever they had come for, they weren't going to interfere with Bussi. He wasn't the one they were after. He understood that much. And yet, there was something deeper in their silent acknowledgement, something dark, foreboding. Without a second glance, Bussi slammed on the gas, speeding off towards the Vatican, his pulse racing. As he glanced in the rearview mirror, the 2 SUVs and the men standing in the road seemed to dissipate into the cold night air, vanishing like phantoms. It was as if they had never been there at all. The moment Bussi arrived at the Vatican, he rushed through the grand hallways, his robes billowing behind him as he made his way to the Pope's private chambers. He had been summoned to see His Holiness, but he already knew this conversation would be unlike any other they had shared. The Pope was a wise man, but even he couldn't see the full picture, not like Bussi could. After being granted an audience, Bussi was escorted into the room where the Pope sat in his high-backed chair, his gaze distant yet piercing, as Archbishop Bussi approached. The candlelight flickered in the dim room, casting tall, wavering shadows along the walls. The scent of incense was heavy, almost suffocating, as if the air itself held ancient secrets that should remain buried. "Your Holiness," Bussi bowed deeply, his voice hushed but urgent. "I come with a matter of great importance. It is about Father Filadelfo." The Pope remained silent for a moment, his hands folded together in his lap. His eyes, though clouded with age, glimmered with something beneath their surface, something knowing. He exhaled slowly, as if preparing himself to speak of things long hidden. "Yes," he said finally, his voice softer than Bussi expected, a voice weighed down by centuries of knowledge. "I have heard. Filadelfo witnessed something." The pause was deliberate, and for a brief second, Bussi thought he saw the flames of the candles flicker unnaturally, casting shadows that twisted on the walls. The Pope's gaze shifted, almost imperceptibly, to a dark corner of the room where no light could reach. Bussi swallowed. "It was more than just something, Your Holiness." He saw things no man should ever see, things that the Church has spent centuries hiding. The Pope's eyes darkened, but not with surprise. Instead, there was a resignation in them, as though he had been expecting this moment. The faintest smile tugged at the corner of his lips, but it was not a smile of warmth. "You speak dangerous words, Archbishop," the Pope said, his tone soft but carrying an undeniable weight. "Even for one such as yourself." The Pope's voice softened almost imperceptibly. "There is much the Church guards, Archbishop. Some secrets even I do not dare to name aloud." His gaze drifted toward a small iron box on a nearby table, its lock sealed with intricate carvings. The box was unassuming to an untrained eye, but Bussi's breath hitched. He had seen it only once before, years ago, in the hidden archives of the Vatican. It was said to contain the original decree establishing the Order of the Hidden Cross, an order shrouded in whispers and half-truths. The Pope returned his gaze to Bussi, his expression unreadable. "You believe yourself prepared to walk this path. Be certain, Archbishop, that it is not the path that will consume you, but the shadows it hides. I know what will happen to Filadelfo if we do nothing. He will vanish, like the others before him. The Church will erase him. I have seen this pattern before, Your Holiness." The Pope leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Bussi's with an intensity that made the Archbishop's skin crawl. "And you believe you understand the forces at play here? You think the Church has not weighed the cost of keeping these truths hidden?" Bussi's throat tightened. There was something in the Pope's voice, a knowledge deeper than the Vatican archives, something ancient and dark. The Pope's next words were like a whisper from another world. "There are things, Archbishop, powers older than Christianity, older than Rome, forces beyond us, beyond Filadelfo, beyond me." The Pope's voice dropped, his next words barely audible. "The Order does not guard these truths lightly." His voice dropped, becoming almost inaudible. "Not even by me." Bussi felt a chill slide down his spine, the cold creeping into his bones. For a moment, the shadows around the room seemed to deepen, as though the walls themselves were listening, waiting. "Your Holiness," Bussi's voice was trembling, but he steadied himself. "I know the dangers. I have spent decades gathering what little I could. I have seen enough to understand the risk. But I believe there is another way. Filadelfo's disappearance would only raise questions, dangerous questions. The press, the people, they will seek answers. But if we were to cleanse him, erase his memory, we could control the narrative." The Pope's lips pressed together in a thin line, his gaze turning towards the flickering candle beside him. Its flame danced unnaturally, casting strange, fleeting symbols in the shadows. "Erase his memory?" the Pope echoed, his voice colder now, almost detached. "You speak of the ritual." Bussi nodded. "Yes, Your Holiness. The ritual has not been used in decades, but it is the only way. We cannot make him vanish without consequence. But if we cleanse his mind, if we rewrite his reality, we can place him somewhere safe, where he will no longer be a threat." The Pope's silence was thick, palpable. He rose slowly from his seat, his robe brushing against the floor, and moved to the window. Outside, the Vatican was bathed in darkness, the ancient walls seeming to close in around them both. "There is a reason," the Pope began, "why the ritual has not been used in so long." His voice grew softer, but the weight of it pressed down on Bussi's chest. "It is not just dangerous, Archbishop. It is cruel. It does not simply erase memories. It unravels the soul." Bussi felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had heard rumors of what the ritual could do, of priests who had gone mad, of minds shattered beyond repair. But he had also heard of its success. He clung to the latter, desperate. "The alternative is worse," Bussi pressed, stepping closer. "To vanish him without a trace is to sentence him to death. This way we can still save him, even if the process is harsh. The Pope turned his head slightly, his eyes narrowing. Do you truly believe that you are saving him? Or are you simply afraid of what he might reveal? Bussi swallowed hard. I am trying to prevent the collapse of everything we've worked for, Your Holiness. If word of what Filadelfo saw spreads, the consequences will be catastrophic. We cannot let the world know what lies beneath our feet. I beg of you, let me perform the ritual. The Pope stared at Bussi for a long, unnerving moment, his face unreadable. Then finally he spoke, his voice almost a whisper. You have seen much, Archbishop, far more than I suspect you were ever meant to see. Bussi's heart skipped a beat. There was something in the Pope's tone, an acknowledgement that perhaps Bussi had stumbled onto something far beyond his comprehension, something that should have remained hidden. You tread dangerous ground, the Pope continued, his eyes flickering with an emotion Bussi couldn't quite place. But perhaps you are right. Perhaps this is the lesser of two evils. But understand this, Archbishop. His voice dropped to a chilling whisper. There are forces at work here, forces you cannot hope to control. The ritual may cleanse his memory, but it will not cleanse the truth. That truth will always remain. It lingers, in the shadows, in the dark corners of this very room. For a moment the Pope's eyes seemed to gleam, almost as if reflecting the flickering candlelight. But Bussi could swear that the darkness in the room shifted, a shadow curling at the edges of his vision. I will grant you permission to perform the ritual, the Pope said, his voice returning to its usual calm. But be warned, Archbishop. You may find that in your pursuit of saving him, you lose something far greater. Bussi felt the weight of the words settle over him like a shroud. He bowed deeply, hiding the tremor in his voice. Thank you, Your Holiness. I will proceed with caution. As he turned to leave, the Pope's voice stopped him one last time. And Archbishop, the Pope said softly, pray that what you have set in motion does not consume you as well. Bussi turned back briefly to see the Pope still standing by the window, his silhouette framed against the darkened sky. For a fleeting moment, Bussi thought he saw the faintest trace of a smile on the Pope's lips, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. With that, Bussi left the room, his mind buzzing with the weight of what had just transpired. The permission was granted, but something far more ominous now clung to him, something ancient and unspoken, lurking just beneath the surface. Bussi bowed deeply. Thank you, Your Holiness. I won't fail. The following morning, Filadelfo stood at the entrance to the ancient monastery, a letter from the Pope himself clutched in his hand. The vast, imposing structure loomed before him, its towering stone walls bathed in the pale light of dawn. The air was cold, sharp, and carried a sense of finality that settled deep in Filadelfo's bones. He had been summoned to see His Holiness, and now, after the ritual, he had been placed in the Order of the Hidden Cross. The details of the last few days were hazy in his mind. He remembered standing before the Pope, feeling the weight of judgment on him. And then there had been something, a ritual, a cleansing. He couldn't recall exactly what had happened. Filadelfo touched his forehead absent-mindedly, his fingers brushing against skin that felt oddly sensitive, as though it had been burned. Fragments of the ritual flickered in his mind, voices chanting in an ancient language, hands pressing on his temples, and blinding light so bright it seemed to cut into his soul. There had been a moment, brief but visceral, when he had felt something leave him, something ripped away, leaving behind a hollowness he couldn't explain. The details eluded him. The harder he tried to recall, the more they slipped through his grasp like sand spilling between his fingers. All he knew was the ache deep in his chest and the nagging sensation that whatever was gone had been vital to who he was. The Pope's warning rang faintly in his mind, though he could no longer remember the exact words. Only their weight remained. But he knew one thing. He had been assigned a new role, a role that would see him live out the rest of his days beneath the Vatican, away from the world, away from everything he had known. As he stepped through the grand entrance of the monastery, the heavy doors closed behind him with a soft thud, sealing his fate. Inside, the cold stone corridors stretched out before him, silent, endless. The air inside the monastery clung to Filadelfo like a damp cloth, heavy with the scent of cold stone and something faintly metallic. The sound of his footsteps echoed down the long, arched corridor, but the space swallowed the noise, making it feel distant, as though the building itself were alive and listening. He clutched the Pope's letter tightly, its edges curling from his grip. His eyes darted to the towering walls, where faint carvings seemed to emerge and retreat into the shadows with each flicker of torchlight, shapes that looked like angels, yet twisted, their wings too sharp, their eyes too hollow. "Follow," a voice commanded, cutting through his trance. He looked up to see a robed figure waiting, face hidden beneath a hood. Without another word, the figure turned and began walking. Filadelfo hesitated, a chill creeping up his spine, but the doors behind him thudded shut with a finality that left him no choice. He followed, each step feeling heavier than the last, as though he were descending into something far deeper than stone halls. The letter from the Pope explained his new duties in meticulous detail. His role was simple: tend to the needs of a man kept beneath the Vatican, a man whose identity was never to be spoken of. "Who is this?" asked a monk, his voice low and rasping as though it were unused to speaking. His gaze flicked to the hooded escort. "Father Filadelfo," the escort replied. "He has been cleansed. He will not question his orders." Filadelfo's mind felt clouded, his thoughts distant and blurred, as though someone had reached into his soul and swept away what didn't belong. Yet, deep down, in the recesses of his being, something whispered that he was not free. Not truly. The monk nodded, his eyes lingering on Filadelfo with something that felt uncomfortably close to pity. Then he turned and disappeared into the shadows. The life he had known was gone. Now he belonged to the Order of the Hidden Cross. His steps echoed down the stone corridor, the sound swallowed by the stillness around him. Somewhere in the silence he thought he heard the faintest sound, a whisper, a breath, or the distant creak of something shifting beneath the earth. It was as though the monastery itself were alive, watching, waiting. He clutched the letter tightly as he walked on, its weight far greater than its parchment. Whatever awaited him beneath the Vatican, he would never be the same again. This chapter may have ended, but the story doesn't. Return next Monday for what waits in the dark. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and leave a comment to share what the shadows may have whispered to you.